Welcome back, everyone. Great to have you with us for another deep dive in our Quran by AI series.
Glad to be here.
Today, we're turning our focus to chapter 16 of the Quran. It's known as the Bee, or Al-Nahl in Arabic.
Right. And it's a substantial chapter, 128 verses. Covers a lot of ground.
It really does. So our mission, as always, is to explore the core themes and ideas packed into these verses.
And a big part of this chapter, you'll notice, is its engagement with those holding different beliefs, particularly polytheists and idolaters.
Yeah, there's definitely a strong polemical thread running through it. You see warnings, discussions of divine punishment,
Like in verses 26 and then 112, 113 later on.
and refutations of accusations, like in verses 38 and 57. Threats of future consequences, too.
Verses 45, 47, 54, 55, 62, 88. It's quite consistent, uses various motifs to make its case.
Okay, let's dive in. The first section, roughly verses 1 to 34, focuses on divine beneficence and God's oneness. It kicks off right away, verse 1. The command of God is coming, so seek not to hasten it. What's this command referring to?
Well, there are a couple of main interpretations. One view connects it to the end times, the hour, that final judgment. It's imminent.
Okay.
But another strong reading, especially looking at what follows, is that the command, the Amr, is actually the revelation itself, the Quranic message being delivered. The verb tense in Arabic suggests something already set in motion.
So it could be the unfolding revelation, not just a future event. That makes sense.
Either way, it sets a tone of divine authority right from the start.
Then verse 3 says, God created the heavens and earth in truth. What's packed into that phrase?
It's about purposefulness. Creation isn't random. It's grounded in truth, reality, goodness. It reflects the Creator.
And verse 4 immediately gives us this striking image. Humans created from just a drop, but then becoming a manifest adversary.
Yeah, that's a core tension, isn't it? Our humble origins versus our capacity for denial, for opposition, even when we owe our existence to God. It's a warning against ingratitude.
This idea of God's gifts continues. Verses 5 to 7 talk about cattle, not just their utility food, warmth, but their beauty too.
Exactly. It's showing the tangible, multifaceted blessings. They're practical, yes, but also pleasing. These are presented as signs pointing back to the provider.
Verse 8 adds horses, mules, asses for transport and adornment, and then that line, and he creates what you do not know.
That's a key reminder of our limited knowledge, isn't it?
Yeah.
We see and use what's around us, but God's creative power extends far beyond our comprehension. It underlines his infinite capacity.
Then verse 9 shifts slightly. It talks about God showing the straight way, but also notes that some paths deviate, and crucially, that if God willed, he could have guided everyone. This feels important.
Very important. It touches on that complex relationship between divine guidance and human free will. God provides the path.
But doesn't compel everyone onto it.
Right. People have agency. Some interpretations stress God's ultimate decree and guidance. Others emphasize human choice. The verse seems to hold both. The path is shown, but following it isn't automatic.
Okay. Then verses 10 through 16 give us this rapid-fire list of natural blessings. Rain, vegetation, crops, olives, dates, grapes.
All kinds of fruit, yeah.
The cycles of night and day, sun, moon, stars.
All subjected by his command, as verse 12 says.
The diversity of colors on earth in verse 13. The sea providing food and ornaments, ships sailing on it.
Verse 14, and then mountains anchoring the earth, rivers, paths for guidance, landmarks, stars for navigation in verses 15 and 16.
Phew. What's the overall effect of listing all these things?
It's building a cumulative case, really. Each element is presented as a sign, an ayah, demonstrating God's power, wisdom, and constant provision. It's an appeal to recognize the source of all these benefits.
That mention of the sun, moon, and stars in verse 12, are there parallels elsewhere?
There's a surface similarity perhaps to passages like Luke 21.25, but the context is totally different. Here, it's about divine favor and signs of creation, not signs of impending doom. The praise of God as creator also resonates with themes in the Psalms, of course.
Got it. So after this long list of creations, verse 17 hits with a direct question. Is he who creates like one who creates not?
It's a powerful rhetorical challenge. How can you possibly equate the ultimate creator with anything that cannot create, that might itself be created, like an idol? It demands logical reflection.
And that's reinforced immediately. Verse 18 says you couldn't even count God's blessings if you tried. Verse 19, he knows everything, hidden or open.
Exactly. It emphasizes God's immeasurable bounty and omniscience, contrasting it starkly with the impotence and ignorance attributed to false deities.
Then verses 20 and 21 drive that point home about idols. They create nothing, are themselves created, they're dead, not living, and don't even know when they'll be resurrected. Dead, not living. That's strong phrasing.
It really is. It stresses their utter lack of power or agency. They have no life, no awareness, no ability to help anyone. It underlines the futility of worshiping them.
This whole section culminates in verse 22. Your God is one God. Simple, direct.
The core message. And it immediately links disbelief in the hereafter with hearts that deny and with arrogance.
Which verse 23 picks up on. God knows what they hide and reveal, and he doesn't love the arrogant.
Right. Arrogance is presented as fundamentally incompatible with submitting to the one true God.
Okay, let's shift gears to the next section, verses 24 through 32. This focuses more on judgment. Verse 24 describes the disbeliever's reaction when asked about God's revelation. Fables of those of old.
A classic dismissal tactic, isn't it? Trying to delegitimize the message by calling it old stories, avoiding the substance.
And the consequence. Verse 25 says, on Judgment Day, they'll carry their own burdens fully, plus some burdens of those they misled. That's heavy.
It underscores the responsibility that comes with influence. Misguiding others has serious consequences, adding to one's own accountability.
Verse 26 gives a historical example. People before them plotted, but God's punishment undermined them unexpectedly. Their buildings collapsed.
A cautionary tale. It shows that human schemes against divine will are ultimately powerless and vulnerable.
Then comes the scene on Resurrection Day, verse 27. God disgraces them, asks, where are my partners? And those with knowledge confirm the disgrace is on the disbelievers.
Total humiliation. The things they relied on are gone, and the truth is laid bare.
Verses 28 and 29 describe the angels taking their souls. They try to claim innocence. We weren't doing evil, but the response is sharp. God knows, enter hell, the abode of the arrogant.
No escape, no excuses accepted then. Their lifelong arrogance meets its end result.
But then, a stark contrast. Verse 30, the reverent, when asked the same questions, say, goodness. They recognize the revelation as good.
And their reward reflects that. Goodness in this life, yes, but the hereafter is far better for them.
Which verses 31 and 32 describe vividly. Gardens of Eden, rivers flowing, getting whatever they wish.
And the angels welcoming them with, peace be upon you, enter the garden. A beautiful image of reward for righteousness and faith.
Moving into the next block, verses 35 to 64, this feels like a more direct critique of polytheism. Verse 35 quotes them saying, essentially, if God hadn't wanted us to worship these other things, we wouldn't have.
Yeah, it's presented as a weak excuse, a way to deflect responsibility. Just because God allows something doesn't mean he approves of it.
And verse 26 counters that directly. Messengers came to every community saying, worship God, shun false deities. Some followed, some didn't. Look at the fate of the deniers, it urges.
It highlights the universality of the message and places the onus back on human choice and accountability. History serves as the evidence.
Verse 37 adds that even the prophet can't force guidance. If God doesn't guide those who actively lead astray, they won't be guided.
It clarifies the prophet's role. Deliver the message. Guidance itself is from God, and it's withheld from those who persist in error.
Then verse 38 mentions their strong oaths that God won't resurrect the dead.
A major point of denial. The chapter refutes this immediately, calling resurrection a binding promise from God.
Verse 39 says this is so God can clarify their disputes and show the disbelievers they were liars.
And verse 40 underscores God's absolute power to do this. He just says, be, and it is. Resurrection is no challenge for him.
Verses 41 and 42 then offer comfort to those who emigrated for God's sake after persecution.
Right, promising them a good settlement in this life and an even greater reward later, specifically for their patience and trust in God. It's encouragement for sacrifice.
Verse 43 connects back to previous prophets. They were also men receiving revelation. Ask people of knowledge if you doubt.
Establishing continuity. And verse 44 emphasizes the Quran's role as a clarification sent down so people would reflect.
Then verses 45 to 47 pose those chilling questions again. Do plotters of evil feel safe from God sinking the earth, or punishment arriving unexpectedly, or seizing them gradually?
Stark warnings intended to shake complacency and remind listeners of God's power and the unpredictable nature of divine justice.
Verses 48, 49, and 50 describe all creation, shadows, creatures, angels prostrating to God humbly, without arrogance.
A powerful image of universal submission. Everything acknowledges God's sovereignty. This contrasts sharply with human pride and maybe nods towards Iblis's refusal.
Verse 51 brings it back to the core command. Don't take two gods. He's one God. Fear him alone.
Reiterated in verse 52, everything belongs to him. Religion is his eternally. Why revere anyone else?
Verse 53 reminds that all blessings are from God, and in hardship, people cry out to him.
But then verses 54 and 55 point out the inconsistency. When relief comes, some immediately turn back to associating partners, becoming ungrateful.
Yeah, that highlights a common human tendency, doesn't it? Remembering God in crisis, forgetting him in ease.
Verse 56 criticizes dedicating parts of God's own provisions to idols they know nothing about, warning they'll be questioned.
Then verses 57 to 59 tackle that specific issue, the polemic of daughters. They attribute daughters to God, something they themselves disliked, while claiming the best sons for themselves.
It exposes deep hypocrisy and connects to the horrific practice of female infanticide. Verse 59 describes the father's reaction, dark face, suppressed grief when told he has a daughter. It's a sharp critique of their values.
Verse 60 contrasts their evil description with God's loftiest description. Verse 61 speaks of God's patience, giving respite instead of immediate punishment.
But verse 62 circles back, assigning God what they dislike, lying that the best is theirs, the fire awaits them. God's forbearance isn't endless.
Verse 63 mentions Satan making caste communities' deeds seem fair to them, leading them astray. Verse 64 reaffirms the Quran's purpose: clarification, guidance, mercy for believers.
Setting the current rejection in a historical pattern and emphasizing the Quran's positive role for those who accept it.
Okay, verses 65 to 74 seem to pivot back to signs in nature, showing God's power. Verse 65, rain reviving dead earth.
A clear sign for those who hear, who are receptive. Life from apparent death.
Verse 66, the lesson from cattle. Pure milk coming from between waste and blood.
An amazing biological wonder pointed out as a sign.
Verse 67 mentions drink from dates and grapes, both intoxicating drink, sakar, and good provision. The mention of sakar here is interesting.
It is, historically.
Yeah.
It reflects a reality before later Quranic verses clarified the prohibition of intoxicants. Here it's listed alongside goodly provision as something derived from these fruits.
And then the verses that name the chapter, 68 and 69, about the bee, God inspired the bee.
To build homes, eat from fruits, follow paths made easy.
Producing honey, this drink of varied colors containing healing for people, a powerful sign.
Absolutely. It's a prime example of intricate, beneficial behavior in nature stemming from divine guidance or inspiration. Why? It's a microcosm of the chapter's themes.
Verse 70 reflects on the human lifespan. Creation, death, some reaching feeble old age, losing knowledge. God remains knowing, powerful.
A reminder of our own limitations and dependence across our entire lives.
Verse 71 makes that interesting point about differing provisions. God favors some over others, but the favored don't share equally with their slaves. What's the takeaway?
It seems less about justifying inequality and more about using a social reality to make a theological point. It points out human possessiveness. If you don't share your blessings equally, how can you expect God to share his divinity? It challenges their rejection of God's blessings.
Ah, okay. Verse 72 mentions mates, children, grandchildren, good provisions, then asks, do they believe in falsehood and deny these blessings?
Again, contrasting lived reality with misguided belief.
Verse 73 challenges worshiping powerless beings. And verse 74 concludes this section strongly. Don't make comparisons or parables for God. He knows you don't.
Underscoring God's uniqueness, his transcendence beyond human analogies or comprehension.
Next up, verses 75 to 79 use parables. Verse 75 contrasts a powerless slave with someone well-provided who gives freely. Are they equal?
Obviously not.
Verse 76 contrasts a mute, burdensome man with someone who commands justice and follows a straight path. Equal.
Again, clearly no. These parables make the difference between powerless idols and the all-powerful, just God, incredibly stark and obvious. It's an appeal to reason.
Verse 77 zooms back out. God knows the unseen. The hour is like a blink of an eye. Verse 78 reminds us we knew nothing at birth, then got hearing, sight, hearts for gratitude.
Connecting God's ultimate power and knowledge with the intimate gifts he gives each individual.
And verse 79, the birds held up in the air, only God sustains them. Another sign for believers.
A beautiful image of constant, often unnoticed, divine support maintaining the natural order.
Okay, verses 80 to 89, more blessings listed than accountability. Verse 80, homes for rest, tents from skins. Verse 81, shade, mountain shelters, protective clothing, God completing his favor.
Detailing the provisions for basic human needs, shelter, comfort, safety, all attributed to God's blessing, aiming for submission. Islam.
Verse 82, if they still turn away, the prophet's job is just clear delivery. Verse 83, they recognize God's blessings but then deny them. Most are ungrateful, kafirun.
Highlighting the tragedy of recognizing truth but refusing to accept its implications. Ingratitude is linked to disbelief.
Then Judgment Day again, verse 84. a witness from each community. Disbelievers silenced, no excuses allowed. Verse 85. Punishment won't be lightened, no respite.
Absolute finality and justice. The time for debate or amends is over.
Verses 86 and 87 show them calling on their partners, who then deny them, calling them liars. Their fabrications abandon them.
The ultimate betrayal by the very things they worshipped instead of God.
Verse 88 adds that those who disbelieved and actively blocked God's way get added punishment for their corruption.
Again, emphasizing the increased responsibility for hindering others.
And verse 89 wraps this up. The prophet is a witness against his people, and the book, Quran, is sent as a clarification of everything: guidance, mercy, good news for those who submit. Muslimin.
A powerful statement on the Quran's comprehensive nature and purpose, and the role of the prophet as witness.
Next, we have commands and prohibitions, verses 90 to 97. Verse 90 is quite famous: commanding justice, adl, virtue, ihsan, giving to relatives, forbidding indecency, wrong, rebellion.
A cornerstone verse for Islamic ethics. Very comprehensive summary of moral conduct.
Verses 91 through 94 really hammer home keeping oaths and covenants made with God. Don't unravel your pledge like weak yarn. Don't use oaths deceitfully.
Strong emphasis on integrity, trustworthiness, the sanctity of commitments made before God. Deception leads to punishment.
Verses 95 and 96 warn against selling God's pact cheaply. What's with God is better and lasts forever. Patience will be rewarded.
Contrasting fleeting worldly gain with eternal divine reward. Patience is key.
And verse 97 promises a good life, hayatan tayyiba, now, and the best reward later, for any believer, male or female, who does good deeds.
A beautiful promise of both worldly contentment and ultimate reward based on faith and action, explicitly equal for men and women.
Now the section from 98 to 111, focusing on the Quran itself, truth, guidance. Verse 98, seek refuge in God from Satan when reciting the Quran.
Practical advice. Recognizing potential distraction or misinterpretation when engaging with Scripture.
Verses 99 and 100 clarify Satan's influence. No power over believers who trust God, only over those who ally with him and commit shirk, polytheism.
Faith and trust are presented as a shield against evil influence.
Verse 101 tackles abrogation, nosk, directly. When God substitutes one sign for another, disbelievers accuse the prophet, you're just making it up.
It addresses a specific challenge regarding perceived changes or updates within the revelation, attributing it to God's wisdom while refuting the fabrication charge.
Verse 102 affirms the Quran's source. The Holy Spirit, understood as Gabriel, brought it down from God with truth to strengthen believers and as guidance and good news.
Directly countering the fabrication claim by stating its divine origin and purpose.
And verse 103 tackles another accusation, that a human taught the prophet. It counters by pointing out the alleged teacher's language was foreign, Ajami, while the Quran is clear Arabic, Arabi Mubin.
Using linguistic evidence to argue for the Quran's unique divine source.
Verses 104 and 105 turn the tables. God doesn't guide those who reject his signs. They are the ones who fabricate lies. They are the liars.
Reversing the accusation. Disbelief itself is presented as the source of falsehood.
Verse 106 is quite specific, about disbelief after belief. An exception is made for someone forced externally whose heart remains faithful, but wrath is upon those who willingly open themselves to disbelief.
This acknowledges situations of extreme coercion, focusing on the internal state of faith. But willing apostasy carries severe consequences. This is often linked to specific historical events.
Verses 107 to 109 explain why this happens. They preferred this world over the hereafter, so God seals their hearts, hearing, sight. They become heedless, the ultimate losers.
Linking cause and effect. Prioritizing the world leads to spiritual blindness and eternal loss.
But verses 110 and 111 offer reassurance again, circling back perhaps to verse 41. For those who emigrated after persecution, then struggled and were patient, God is forgiving, merciful.
Offering hope and acknowledging the struggles of the early believers.
And verse 111 reminds that on Judgment Day, every soul argues for itself and is paid in full justly.
Reiteration of individual accountability and perfect divine justice.
Finally, the concluding section, verses 112 to 128, divine justice and guidance wrap-up. It starts with another parable, verses 112 for 113. A town, once safe and prosperous, became ungrateful for God's blessings.
They denied the messenger sent to them.
So God made them taste hunger and fear as a consequence of their actions, a punishment legend, a cautionary tale.
Right, a final warning through narrative about the results of ingratitude and rejection.
Verses 114 and 115 return to practical matters. Eat the lawful good things God provides, be thankful. Then it lists the main dietary prohibitions. Carrion, blood, pork, and meat sacrificed to other than God.
But with that important clause, if forced by necessity, without desiring it or transgressing limits, God is forgiving, merciful, shows pragmatism alongside principle.
Verses 116 and 117 deliver a strong warning. Don't just declare things lawful or forbidden with your tongues, inventing lies against God. Those who do won't succeed.
A caution against unauthorized religious innovation or arbitrary prohibitions permissions. Authority rests with divine revelation.
Verse 118 briefly refers back to dietary laws for Jews, mentioning things forbidden to them, as detailed elsewhere, like chapter 6, verse 146, stating God didn't wrong them, they wronged themselves.
Placing those laws within a context of consequence for past actions, affirming God's justice.
Verse 119 offers forgiveness again. For those who do evil in ignorance but then repent and reform, God is forgiving, merciful.
Emphasizing the path of repentance and God's readiness to forgive sincere turning back.
Verses 120 to 123. Then hold up Abraham as a prime example. He's called an ummah here. What does that mean exactly?
It's usually translated as community or nation, but here, applied to one person, it implies he was so righteous he embodied the virtues of a whole community. A model leader, devout, obedient. A hanif, someone who naturally leaned towards monotheism, not a polytheist.
And verse 123 explicitly tells the Prophet Muhammad, follow the creed of Abraham.
Connecting the Quranic message directly to the pure original monotheism of Abraham.
Verse 124 addresses the Sabbath, saying it was ordained only for those Jews who differed about it, and God will judge their differences later.
Situating the Sabbath observance within its specific historical and religious context.
And the final verses, 125 to 128, offer guidance on how to convey the message. Verse 125, call to God's way with wisdom, good counsel, argue kindly, God knows best who is guided.
Beautiful advice on methodology.
Mm.
Persuasion, not coercion. Wisdom and kindness.
Verse 126 addresses retaliation. If you punish, do so proportionately to the harm done, but patience is better.
Setting limits on retribution while elevating the virtue of patience.
Verse 127 directly tells the prophet, be patient. Your patience is only through God. Don't grieve over them or be distressed by their plots.
Personal encouragement and grounding patience in divine support.
And the very last verse, 128. Truly God is with those who are reverent, mutakin, and those who are virtuous, musinun.
A concluding assurance of divine companionship and support for those who strive for righteousness and God consciousness.
Wow. Chapter 16, the bee, really does pack a punch. It covers theology, nature, ethics, history, law.
It's incredibly rich, from condemning polytheism and stressing God's unity to detailing creation's wonders to giving specific commands and comfort. It weaves it all together.
That metaphor of the bee receiving inspiration to create something beneficial and healing feels like a fitting symbol for the whole chapter's message about divine guidance in the world.
It really does. And the constant return to signs in nature is a powerful call to observe, reflect, and recognize the creator behind it all.
It also doesn't shy away from complex issues like divine will and human choice, or even the nature of the Quranic revelation itself.
No, it engages directly with the challenges and questions of its audience.
We really hope this deep dive has given you plenty to think about regarding the themes in the bee. Maybe think about which signs resonated most, or what questions it leaves you with.
It's definitely a chapter that invites and rewards ongoing reflection and deeper engagement. Okay, well, until next time, thank you so much.